Good morning. I'm sorry for missing the last 4 days. I had to work, but I got the album mixed and mastered, and it's off. And so now I can get back to doing what I love to do. And I really do enjoy doing this every day. We had talked about following our inside voice and chasing our dreams. Well, there's a flip side of that. Like with everything. You have a positive and a negative, and good, bad, or however you want to determine it. So the flip side of listening to that voice and following what you know that you should do is fear. Because fear will keep us from not doing that. Because first of all, there's just so many different types of fears. But, when we get that message, and we're thinking about that message and we're ready to act on that message, then our brain sometimes kicks in and we start thinking, well, if I do this, well, that could happen or this could happen. And those negative thoughts will come in, or thoughts that we were programmed with when we were a child, they kick in. People telling us, well, you can't do that. Then they'll kick in. And so we're going to talk about fear and how debilitating fear can be. I'm going to read a couple paragraphs out of my book, Half Black, Half White, Finding Me and My Place in America. And real briefly, just to set it up, after I had got off the streets, I went to school. And just so happened to be that the school I was going into was where I did most of my drinking and drugging. And I owed a lot of people money in that area. So, and I knew that there were a lot of people, looking for me. I had ripped off drug dealers, and I did a bunch of other stuff. So, if I had to pick any other area to go to school in, that probably would be the last one. But the way it worked out, that's where I had to go. And I believe that sometimes God will, put us in places to address those fears. So this is I'm reading from the book. I couldn't see why God would want me to live in fear all over again. Why wouldn't He just help me out and let me get a car if He wanted to help me get through school? Shit would be much easier. One morning when I was riding to school, I was praying, and I remembered what Sammy always said. Either God is or He isn't. I thought about all the times He protected me when I was doing the wrong thing, and now that I was doing something constructive, He would also continue to protect me. I know He wouldn't take me this far just to let me get hurt or killed. I just needed to let Him do for me what I couldn't do for myself. I needed to have faith that I was doing what God wanted me to do. If I was doing God's will, He would put His veil around me and see that I am protected. I needed to jump off that cliff and let God catch me. I turned it over to Him and jumped, and He was there. It wasn't easy to let go. I walked up that street and stood on that corner and waited on that bus the next day as if all in the hood had loved me. I was scared to death while I was standing out there, totally exposed. I decided that God is everything, and there is nothing that can happen to me that isn't first cleared by Him. He is the decision maker of my fate. I walked that street and stood on that corner every day that I needed to go to school. I don't want to be confused about this point or lesson. It was faith that helped me stand on that corner, and not courage or bravery. And I'm going to stop there because that's very important. So I was taking the bus every day to school because, just getting off the street, and I didn't have a car. And I had to stand on the street corner to catch that bus. So I was just standing out there, when I talk about being totally exposed. And when I decided that I was going to, let God also handle this, and I was going to put that fear in God's hands. Because one thing about fear is what fear starts to erode is faith. That's what gets attacked. And we're all human, and sometimes our faith is going to be weakened. But what I learned was that, every part of my life I have to turn over to God. And when I decided, you know what, I'm not going to let this fear keep me from going to school and get my bachelor's degree. I'm not going to do it. I knew that I was in God's will. Remember, we had talked about God's will. I knew I was in God's will by doing it. And when I read in the book about if I'm in God's will, then His veil of protection will be there. He's not going to let anything happen to me that He doesn't say, okay, you know what, I'm going to let that happen to Gene, or I'm going to let that happen to y'all. If you're in God's will, you're doing the right thing, and you are protected. People can call it, you could say if you're in God's will, or if you're in the flow of life, or if it's karma, however you want to say it. I'm just saying God's will because that's just how I believe. But if you are in that flow, in that natural flow of life, the way it's supposed to be, then nothing will happen to you that isn't supposed to happen. You are protected. And, that was one of the lessons I had learned by me going back to school. And that was one of the early little cliffs or jumps that I took with faith. Because it takes time before you can jump off that cliff and not look down to see if God is going to catch you. You have to take some small jumps first. And that's what happened here. But there's so many different types of fear. Not just physical fear, you thinking somebody's going to hurt you or you're going to get in a car accident. But there's the emotional fear also. And I don't want it to seem like that this discussion of fear is fear of another person hurting you. There's fear of failure. Starting a business and not knowing what's going to happen. Fear of like what's going on now with money and people making money and enough to survive, and that can be very debilitating and very depressing. So all of it we have to turn over to God. And if you can't turn it all over at one time, just do it day by day. Just say, you know what, today I'm not going to worry or stress too much about money or my love life or about my kids or about my health or all of those things. Because all of those issues we all have. It's just, what are we going to do with them? How are we going to keep going through life? And that's basically what I'm talking about. Is you're going to have to turn it over to whatever higher power that you have. You have to turn that over to, and don't let that fear stop you from doing things. Because one thing I learned about God also too is that sometimes the door will be open for us to walk through, and we have to address that fear before we walk through that door. Now, God is always repositioning Himself. So sometimes He'll open that door and He'll let us walk through that door ourselves. And we'll keep getting those messages telling us walk through that door, walk through that door, walk through that door. And sometimes, my God anyway, I think He has a sense of humor, and He gets to a point where saying, well, you know what, I'm not going to keep telling you to walk through that door. And He'll reposition Himself behind me and actually kick me through that door. It's always more painful when He does it that way. But the truth of the matter is, we're going to get through that door. We're going to get through that fear. It's just how easy do we want to make it on ourselves? That's the only question. And one thing I don't want to happen is when I get ready to die, I don't want to have those what ifs because I was too afraid to go through that door. And we can't let that happen. We can't let fear keep us stuck on stupid. I think that's probably the best way to do it, is to say it, is we cannot let that happen. We have to address our fear, talk to somebody about how we feel. When I was writing